Ever felt paralyzed by procrastination, watching opportunities slip away? The audiobook, Get It Done, Force Yourself to Take Action, is your neuroscientific battle plan for conquering delay. Discover how to hijack your brain's reward system, weaponize urgency, and transform setbacks into fuel for growth. Without these strategies, you risk staying trapped in a cycle of inaction and missed potential. Arm yourself with cutting-edge techniques from elite military training and psychology to finally break free and achieve lasting change. Before we go on, I invite you to download the free bundle, which contains the ebook version of this book and an executive summary of all the chapters with the key takeaways. Studies show that engaging with content through multiple formats significantly enhances learning and retention. Click on the first link in the description to claim your free bundle now and maximize your learning potential. Now it's free, but it won't be for long, so make sure to grab it while you can. Chapter 1: War on Delay. The clock ticks relentlessly, each second a battle lost or won in the war against procrastination. Your mind, once an ally, has become a treacherous battlefield where tasks loom like enemy combatants. But today, we declare war on delay. This is not a gentle nudge towards productivity, it's a full-scale assault on the forces that hold you back. Procrastination isn't just a bad habit, it's an existential threat to your growth and success. It's time to recognize it as such and respond with the urgency of a nation under siege. The strategies you're about to learn aren't mere productivity hacks. They're weapons in your arsenal against the most insidious enemy you'll ever face, your own tendency to delay. Your brain, evolved for survival in a world of immediate physical threats, treats complex tasks as dangers to be avoided. The amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, responds to a looming deadline or a challenging project with the same freeze response it would to a predator in the wild. This neurological hijack is at the root of procrastination, and understanding it is the first step in rewiring your response. But knowledge alone isn't enough. You need to mobilize, to take action with the intensity of a wartime effort. Consider this. 1 year of delay in your career progression could translate to a 14% income loss over a decade. That's not just a minor setback, it's a significant blow to your future. By quantifying the cost of inaction, we trigger a powerful motivator: loss aversion. Your brain is wired to avoid losses more strongly than it seeks gains, and we're going to exploit this bias to propel you into action. To truly internalize the urgency required, we'll borrow a mindset from one of history's most intense periods of focused action, the Manhattan Project. During World War II, scientists raced against time to develop atomic technology, knowing that every day of delay could change the course of history. While your tasks may not have world-altering consequences, adopting this level of urgency can transform your approach to getting things done. Let's start with immediate action. Right now, declare a mental state of emergency in your life. This isn't hyperbole, it's a necessary shift in mindset. Take out a piece of paper and calculate the personal cost of your procrastination. Be brutally honest. How much money have you lost through missed opportunities? What has it cost you in terms of reputation or career advancement? Write it down in stark numerical terms. Next, draft what we'll call a "This Must Die Today" list. These are the tasks that have been haunting you, the ones you've pushed off time and again. Write them down and commit to tackling them with the ferocity of someone fighting for survival. Now, we implement the 24-hour draft rule. This isn't a suggestion, it's a mandate. For every task on your list, you must take concrete action within 24 hours. Not planning, not preparation, but real, tangible progress. Set non-negotiable start times for at least 3 high-priority tasks. Treat these times as you would a critical meeting or a flight departure, absolutely unmissable. This immediate action serves a crucial neurological purpose. By forcing yourself to engage with tasks quickly, you begin to rewire your amygdala's response. Instead of freezing in the face of challenges, you're training your brain to leap into action. This is the beginning of developing a neuroplastic resistance to task avoidance. Over time, as you continue to apply these strategies, you'll find yourself operating in what we call continuous survival mode against delays. This doesn't mean constant stress. Rather, it's a state of heightened awareness and readiness to act. You'll develop an automatic threat detection system for procrastination triggers, allowing you to neutralize them before they take hold. To achieve this, we need to identify and dismantle your personal sabotage mechanisms. Start by mapping out which tasks consistently trigger your freeze response. Is it writing reports, making phone calls, analyzing data? Knowing your weak points is crucial for fortifying your defenses. Once you've identified these triggers, it's time for a scorched earth distraction cleanse. This is exactly as intense as it sounds. Identify the top 3 apps or websites that waste your time and delete or block them. No exceptions, no compromises. This might feel drastic, but remember, we're at war, and in war, tough decisions are necessary for victory. You might wonder why we're taking such an aggressive approach. The reason is rooted in how the brain forms new habits. Amygdala rewiring requires immediate action to precede reflection. By acting first and analyzing later, we bypass the overthinking that often leads to procrastination. Moreover, by tapping into loss aversion, we create a biological urgency that far surpasses the motivation provided by traditional deadlines. Let's delve deeper into the neural battlefield. We've touched on the amygdala's freeze response, but there's another saboteur at work, the default mode network, DMN. This is the brain's daydreaming center, and it kicks into high gear when you're faced with effortful tasks. The DMN isn't malicious, it's trying to conserve energy. But in our modern world, where mental effort rarely equates to physical danger, this energy conservation becomes counterproductive. To combat these neural saboteurs, we need to adopt what I call the Manhattan Project mindset. Just as scientists worked around the clock with a sense of urgent purpose, you need to approach your tasks with the mindset that, if I don't act today, the enemy wins. This isn't mere motivational speak. It's a psychological hack to bypass your brain's resistance to effort. Try this. Assign enemy roles to your procrastination vectors. Treat incoming emails like enemy snipers, each one potentially derailing your mission if not dealt with swiftly and efficiently. See your to-do list as a battle plan, each completed task a victory in the larger war against delay. To reinforce this mindset, we'll implement the 24-hour draft rule with strict enforcement. For every task initiation you miss, assign yourself a penalty, say 50 burpees. This might seem extreme, but physical consequences can be powerful motivators, especially when the alternative, doing the task, seems mentally challenging. As you implement these strategies, you'll begin to notice changes. The first time through, you should be able to neutralize some of your instant gratification reflexes. You'll find yourself pausing before automatically checking social media or engaging in other time-wasting activities. This pause is critical. It's the moment where you can choose action over procrastination. But this is just the beginning. Over time, as you continue to apply these principles, you'll develop what can only be described as a superpower, the ability to initiate tasks almost reflexively, bypassing the usual hesitation and doubt. You'll find yourself operating in a state of perpetual readiness, always poised to take action. This state of readiness doesn't come from constant stress or anxiety. Instead, it's a calm alertness, a confidence born from knowing that you've trained your mind to respond to challenges with action rather than avoidance. You'll find that this mindset spills over into other areas of your life, improving your decision-making and increasing your overall effectiveness. The war on delay is not won in a day, a week, or even a month. It's an ongoing campaign, requiring vigilance and consistent effort. But with each small victory, each task completed, each deadline met, you're not just winning battles, you're reshaping the very landscape of your mind. As we close this chapter, remember that the strategies outlined here are just the opening salvo in our campaign against procrastination. In the chapters to come, we'll delve deeper into the neuroscience of action, exploring how to hack your brain's reward systems, create unbreakable habits, and build systems that make procrastination not just difficult, but nearly impossible. The journey ahead will challenge you, push you out of your comfort zone, and demand more of you than perhaps any self-improvement effort has before. But the rewards, increased productivity, reduced stress, and a sense of control over your life and work are immeasurable. Steel yourself for the battles ahead. In our next chapter, we'll uncover the hidden saboteurs lurking in your brain's default settings and arm you with the tools to neutralize them once and for all. The war on delay has begun, and victory is not just possible, it's inevitable for those who fully commit to the fight. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Brain's Default Sabotage. Have you ever wondered why, despite your best intentions, you find yourself falling back into old patterns of procrastination? Why does it seem like your brain is working against you, sabotaging your efforts to be productive and efficient? The answer lies deep within the recesses of your mind, in the ancient wiring that once kept our ancestors alive, but now holds us back in the modern world. As we delve into this chapter, we'll uncover the hidden forces at work within your brain, forces that silently undermine your best efforts and keep you trapped in a cycle of delay and inaction. But more than that, we'll arm you with the knowledge and tools to overcome these internal saboteurs, to rewire your brain for action and progress. Let's start by considering a startling statistic. 83% of New Year's resolutions fail by February. This isn't just a matter of weak willpower or lack of motivation. There's something much more fundamental at play, something hardwired into the very structure of our brains. This something is what we'll call the brain's default sabotage mechanism. To understand this mechanism, we need to take a journey back in time to the prehistoric era when our brains were first taking shape. In those ancient days, survival was the primary concern. Every decision, every action was filtered through a simple question: will this keep me alive? This led to the development of powerful survival instincts that still drive much of our behavior today. The problem is, we're no longer living in that prehistoric world. Our challenges are different, our goals more complex. Yet our brains are still operating on that ancient programming, creating what we call an evolutionary mismatch. This mismatch is at the heart of many of our struggles with procrastination and productivity. At the core of this mismatch is a battle between two parts of your brain, the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for rational planning, decision-making, and long-term thinking. It's the part of your brain that sets goals, makes schedules, and understands the importance of working towards future rewards. The limbic system, on the other hand, is much older in evolutionary terms. It's the seat of our emotions and our most basic survival instincts. When the limbic system perceives a threat, whether that's a predator or a looming deadline, it can override the rational plans of the prefrontal cortex in an instant. This override isn't always a bad thing. In truly dangerous situations, we need to be able to react quickly without getting bogged down in analysis. But in our modern world, where most of our threats are psychological rather than physical, this system can lead us astray. Here's where it gets interesting. Your brain doesn't just react to actual threats. It's constantly on the lookout for potential threats, and one of the things it considers threatening is change. Any deviation from the status quo represents a potential risk, and your limbic system is primed to resist it. This resistance to change manifests as what psychologists call the status quo bias. It's your brain's tendency to prefer things as they are, even if change would be beneficial. This bias is one of the primary reasons why so many of our attempts at self-improvement fail. Your brain, in its misguided attempt to keep you safe, defaults to inaction. But the status quo bias isn't the only way your brain sabotages your efforts. There's another, equally insidious mechanism at work: energy conservation. Your brain, which accounts for about 20% of your body's energy consumption, despite making up only 2% of your body weight, is constantly looking for ways to conserve energy. This energy conservation drive leads to what we might call the path of least resistance. Your brain will naturally gravitate towards tasks and behaviors that require the least amount of effort. This isn't laziness in the traditional sense. It's a deeply ingrained survival strategy that's now working against us in our modern, cognitive-heavy world. In fact, research suggests that your brain tends to resist any effort that exceeds about 1 kilocalorie per minute. This might not sound like much, but it's enough to make the difference between starting that important project and scrolling through social media for another hour. Understanding these mechanisms, the status quo bias and the energy conservation drive, is crucial because it helps us see that our struggles with procrastination aren't moral failings. They're the result of our brains doing exactly what they've evolved to do. The problem is, what worked for our ancestors in the savannah doesn't work for us in the office or the classroom. So, how do we overcome these deeply ingrained tendencies? How do we rewire our brains to align with our modern goals and aspirations? The answer lies in creating systems that bypass our brain's default settings. One powerful approach is what I call the caveman protocol. This involves reframing our tasks in terms our prehistoric brains can understand. Instead of a to-do list filled with abstract concepts, try categorizing your tasks as either hunting, urgent and important, or gathering, important but less time-sensitive. This simple reframing can help engage your brain's reward systems, making it more likely that you'll take action. When you label a task as hunting, you're signaling to your brain that this is something crucial for survival, something that requires immediate attention. Another strategy to consider is what I call the 1 kilocalorie rule. This involves breaking down your tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks that require less than 1 kilocalorie of mental effort. By doing this, you're working with your brain's energy conservation tendencies rather than against them. But perhaps the most powerful tool in our arsenal against the brain's default sabotage is the concept of pre-commitment. This involves setting up systems that make it more painful to procrastinate than to take action. It's a way of aligning your short-term interests, avoiding discomfort, with your long-term goals. One form of pre-commitment is what I call contracts that hurt. These are agreements you make with yourself or others that impose a significant penalty if you fail to follow through on your commitments. For example, you might agree to donate a substantial amount of money to a cause you despise if you miss a deadline. The key here is to make the penalty painful enough that your brain's loss aversion kicks in. Remember, your brain is more motivated to avoid losses than to seek gains. By setting up these contracts, you're essentially hacking your own psychology, using your brain's default settings to your advantage. Another powerful strategy is what I call environmental lockdown design. This involves restructuring your physical environment to remove distractions and make productive behavior the path of least resistance. The goal is to create what I call a zero-option workspace, where only the essential tools for your task are visible and accessible. This might sound extreme, but remember, we're fighting against millions of years of evolutionary programming. Sometimes, extreme measures are necessary to break free from our default patterns of behavior. Now, let's talk about how to apply these concepts in your daily life. Start by identifying 3 tasks that you've been putting off. For each of these tasks, set up a pre-commitment contract. Make the stakes high enough that your brain sits up and takes notice. Remember, the goal isn't to punish yourself, but to create a situation where taking action becomes the most attractive option. Next, take a hard look at your workspace. Conduct what I call a visual friction audit. Look for anything that might distract you or tempt you away from your important tasks. Remove these items from your line of sight, or better yet, from the room entirely. Your goal is to create an environment where focusing on your work is easier than giving in to distraction. As you implement these strategies, you'll likely see some immediate improvements. A good outcome would be a 30% reduction in procrastination-driven task delays. This might not sound like much, but it can make a significant difference in your productivity and stress levels. An excellent outcome would be the neutralization of your limbic system's veto power over tasks. In other words, you'll find yourself able to start difficult tasks without the usual internal struggle. Your rational, goal-oriented prefrontal cortex will be in the driver's seat more often. The best possible outcome? Your tasks will start to initiate automatically via environmental triggers. You'll walk into your zero-option workspace and find yourself naturally gravitating towards productive behavior without the need for conscious effort or willpower. Of course, as with any significant change, there are potential pitfalls to be aware of. One risk is overwhelming yourself with too many pre-commitment contracts. If you're constantly under the gun, you might find yourself burning out or becoming resentful of your own systems. The fix for this is simple. Cap your penalties at a reasonable level, say 5% of your weekly disposable income. This keeps the stakes high enough to be motivating without becoming overwhelming. Another potential issue is that a zero-option workspace might initially feel claustrophobic or restrictive. If you find yourself struggling with this, start small. Begin with 15-minute lockdown periods and gradually extend them as you become more comfortable. As we wrap up this chapter, it's important to remember that overcoming your brain's default sabotage mechanisms is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process of awareness, adjustment, and persistence. But with each small victory, you're not just completing tasks. You're literally rewiring your brain, creating new neural pathways that make productive behavior easier and more natural. In our next chapter, we'll explore an unexpected ally in our war against procrastination. It's a force that most people try to avoid, but when harnessed correctly, it can become a powerful catalyst for action. Prepare to step out of your comfort zone and into a world where pressure becomes your greatest asset. Chapter 3, Pressure Paradox. Pressure. The very word can make your palms sweat and your heart race. We've been conditioned to view pressure as the enemy, a force to be avoided at all costs. But what if I told you that pressure, when properly harnessed, could be the key to unlocking your full potential? What if the very thing you've been running from is actually your ticket to unprecedented productivity and success? Welcome to the Pressure Paradox, a revolutionary approach to getting things done that flies in the face of conventional wisdom. In this chapter, we're going to explore how to engineer biological urgency in a way that overrides the failures of traditional deadlines. But before we dive into the how, let's talk about the why. Consider this startling statistic. According to a 2019 meta-analysis, deadlines fail 67% of workers within just 2 days. That's right, more than 2/3 of us fall off track almost immediately after setting a deadline. If you've ever felt like you're constantly playing catch-up, constantly disappointed in your ability to meet self-imposed timelines, you're not alone. But more importantly, you're not to blame. The problem isn't you. It's the way we've been taught to think about deadlines and pressure. Traditional deadlines activate stress without direction, often leading to paralysis rather than action. They create a sense of looming doom without providing the tools to channel that stress productively. It's like revving an engine without putting the car in gear. Lots of noise and wasted energy, but no forward motion. So why are deadlines so ineffective? To understand this, we need to delve into what I call the Yerkes-Dodson catastrophe curve. This concept, based on the well-established Yerkes-Dodson law in psychology, illustrates the relationship between stress and performance. At low levels of stress, we tend to be unmotivated and unproductive. As stress increases, our performance improves, up to a point. But here's the kicker. Once stress exceeds a certain threshold, our performance doesn't just plateau, it plummets. This sudden drop-off is due to the way excessive stress affects our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for complex thinking, planning, and self-control. When we're overstressed, our prefrontal cortex essentially goes offline, leaving us at the mercy of our more primitive brain regions. This is why you might find yourself mindlessly scrolling through social media instead of tackling that important project as its deadline looms ever closer. But the problems with traditional deadlines don't stop there. We also have to contend with what psychologists call the planning fallacy. This is our tendency to drastically underestimate how long tasks will take to complete. A 2016 study in cognitive science found that people routinely make time estimation errors exceeding 200%. In other words, that project you think will take a week, it's more likely to take 3 weeks or more. This combination of the Yerkes-Dodson catastrophe curve and the planning fallacy creates a perfect storm of procrastination and missed deadlines. We set unrealistic timelines, creating excessive stress that shuts down our ability to think clearly and act effectively. It's a system almost perfectly designed to fail. But here's where things get interesting. What if we could engineer a form of urgency that bypasses these pitfalls? What if we could create a sense of pressure that energizes rather than paralyzes? This is where the pressure paradox comes into play. The key lies in understanding and leveraging 3 fundamental principles of human psychology: the Yerkes-Dodson law, loss aversion, and the immediacy principle. We've already touched on the Yerkes-Dodson law, but let's dig a little deeper. The sweet spot, where stress enhances rather than degrades performance, is different for everyone and can vary depending on the task. The goal is to find and maintain that optimal level of pressure where you feel energized and focused without tipping over into anxiety and overwhelm. Next, we have loss aversion. This principle, first identified by psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, states that the pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. In other words, we're much more motivated by the fear of losing something than by the prospect of gaining something of equal value. Finally, there's the immediacy principle. This is the idea that consequences that are immediate and tangible are far more motivating than those that are distant or abstract. It's why the threat of losing $100 today is more motivating than the promise of gaining $200 next year. By combining these principles, we can create a system of engineered biological urgency that overrides the failures of traditional deadlines. Let me introduce you to 2 powerful techniques: the burn contract protocol and accountability broadcasts. The burn contract protocol is a method of creating immediate, tangible consequences for procrastination. Here's how it works. You set a deadline for a task, but instead of it being an arbitrary date on a calendar, you attach a real, painful consequence to missing it. For example, you might agree to donate a significant amount of money to a cause you despise if you don't complete the task on time. The key is to make the stakes high enough that your brain sits up and takes notice. Remember, we're leveraging loss aversion here. The pain of losing that money needs to outweigh the discomfort of tackling the task. There are even platforms like StickK that can automate this process, ensuring that the consequences are carried out if you fail to meet your commitment. Accountability broadcasts take a different approach, leveraging the power of public commitment and social pressure. The idea is simple but powerful. You publicly commit to posting your daily progress on a task or project. This could be on LinkedIn, Twitter, or any other platform where you have a professional network. The key here is consistency and honesty. You're not just sharing your successes, but also your struggles and setbacks. This serves 2 purposes. It creates external pressure to make daily progress because you know you'll have to report on it, and it helps to normalize the ups and downs of the work process, reducing perfectionism and fear of failure. Now, let's talk about how to apply these concepts in your own life. Start by identifying a project that's been stalled, something important that you've been putting off. Set up a burn contract for this project. Remember, the stakes need to be high enough to get your attention, but not so high that they paralyze you with fear. A good rule of thumb is to choose an amount that makes you uncomfortable but doesn't put you in financial jeopardy. Next, commit to daily accountability broadcasts for the next 7 days. Choose a platform where you have a professional network and make a public commitment to post daily updates on your progress. Be specific about what you're working on and what you hope to achieve each day. As you implement these strategies, you're likely to see some significant changes in your productivity and motivation. A good outcome would be a 50% boost in urgency for your contracted tasks. You'll find yourself prioritizing these tasks, looking for ways to make progress even when you don't feel motivated. An excellent outcome would be a fundamental shift in your relationship with tasks. Instead of avoiding tasks out of fear or discomfort, you'll find yourself driven by a desire to avoid the consequences of inaction. This is task aversion being replaced by consequence aversion, and it's a powerful force for productivity. The best possible outcome? You'll develop what I call an auto-urgent response to all high-stakes objectives. Your brain will start to automatically prioritize important tasks, treating them with the urgency they deserve without the need for external contracts or accountability measures. Of course, as with any powerful tool, there are potential pitfalls to be aware of. One risk is that the penalties in your burn contracts might become trivialized over time. If this happens, the solution is simple: increase the stakes. A good rule of thumb is to increase the penalty by about 20% each week until you hit your pain threshold, the point where the consequence becomes truly motivating again. Another potential issue is that public accountability can sometimes lead to perfectionism. You might find yourself reluctant to post updates unless you've made significant progress. The fix for this is to embrace imperfection. Make a point of posting raw, unedited drafts of your work. Use disclaimers like unedited progress to set expectations. Remember, the goal is consistent action, not perfection. As we wrap up this chapter, I want you to remember that pressure, when properly harnessed, can be your greatest ally in the fight against procrastination. By engineering biological urgency through burn contracts and accountability broadcasts, you're not just setting deadlines, you're creating an environment where action becomes the default, where progress is inevitable. But as powerful as these tools are, they're just the beginning. In our next chapter, we'll explore a force even more potent than pressure, a force that, when properly harnessed, can turn productivity from a chore into an addiction. Get ready to rewire your brain's reward system and tap into an endless wellspring of motivation. Chapter 4: Dopamine Stacking. Imagine a world where your most challenging tasks become irresistible, where procrastination is replaced by an insatiable drive to accomplish more. Sound too good to be true? Welcome to the world of dopamine stacking, where we'll unlock the secrets of your brain's reward system and use them to fuel unprecedented levels of productivity. But before we dive into the how, let's talk about the why. Have you ever wondered why it's so easy to lose hours scrolling through social media, but so hard to focus on that important project? The answer lies in a tiny molecule called dopamine, often referred to as the feel-good neurotransmitter. Dopamine is at the heart of our brain's reward system, driving our behavior by making certain activities feel pleasurable. The problem is, in our modern world, our dopamine system is often hijacked by activities that provide instant gratification but little long-term value. Social media, video games, and other digital distractions are designed to trigger dopamine releases, creating powerful feedback loops that keep us coming back for more. Meanwhile, the activities that truly matter, the ones that lead to long-term success and fulfillment, often lack these immediate dopamine rewards. This imbalance is at the root of much of our struggle with procrastination. Without intervention, our brains are neurologically rewarded for putting off important tasks in favor of quick dopamine hits. It's not a matter of laziness or lack of willpower, it's a matter of brain chemistry. But here's the exciting part. We can use our understanding of dopamine to flip this script. By strategically engineering dopamine releases around productive behaviors, we can literally reprogram our brains to crave execution and achievement. This is the essence of dopamine stacking. At its core, dopamine stacking is about creating and reinforcing dopamine feedback loops that are tied to productive behaviors. It's about making the act of getting things done as neurologically rewarding as checking your social media feed. But to do this effectively, we need to understand a bit more about how dopamine works in our brains. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine isn't just released when we experience pleasure. It's actually more closely tied to anticipation and motivation. When we expect a reward, dopamine levels rise, creating a sense of craving or wanting. This is why the anticipation of checking your phone can be as powerful as the act itself. Understanding this, we can start to see why traditional approaches to productivity often fail. When we engage in what's often called shallow work, quick, easy tasks that provide immediate feedback, we're triggering small but frequent dopamine releases. In contrast, deep work, the kind of focused, challenging work that leads to real achievement, often lacks these immediate rewards. This is where the concept of micro-win ladders comes in. The idea is to break down larger tasks into small, achievable steps, each of which triggers a small dopamine release. By doing this, we create a series of anticipated rewards that pull us through the task, rather than relying on sheer willpower to push through. Here's how it works in practice. Let's say you have a large project to complete. Instead of looking at it as one daunting task, break it down into 5-minute sprints. After each sprint, give yourself a small, immediate reward. This could be as simple as putting a check mark on a list or taking a moment to stand up and stretch. The key is consistency. You want to train your brain to associate progress with reward. But dopamine stacking isn't just about breaking tasks down. It's also about strategically varying your work patterns to keep your brain engaged. This is where the concept of novelty injection comes into play. Our brains are wired to pay attention to novelty. New experiences, unexpected rewards, and varied patterns all trigger dopamine release. We can use this to our advantage by introducing elements of randomness and variety into our work routines. One effective technique is to use randomized time blocks. Instead of working in fixed intervals, try alternating between 15, 25, and 10-minute work periods. The unpredictability keeps your brain engaged, while the varying durations prevent burnout and maintain focus. Another powerful tool in the dopamine stacking arsenal is the dopamine detox protocol. This involves a period of abstinence from your usual sources of easy dopamine hits, things like social media, video games, or other digital distractions. The goal is to reset your dopamine baseline, making the rewards from productive work feel more potent. A full dopamine detox typically involves a 48-hour period of abstinence from screens and other common sources of distraction. It's a challenging but incredibly effective way to break out of unproductive habits and refocus your brain on meaningful work. Now, let's talk about how to apply these concepts in your daily life. Start by choosing one project or area of your work where you've been struggling with procrastination. For this project, create what I call a 5-4-3-2-1 task breakdown. Here's how it works. 5. Break the overall project into 5 major phases. For each phase, identify 4 key milestones. For each milestone, outline 3 specific tasks. For each task, define 2 concrete actions. 1. For each action, determine 1 immediate next step. This breakdown creates a micro-win ladder, giving you a clear path of small, achievable steps. Each step completed becomes a micro-win, triggering a small dopamine release and building momentum. Next, schedule 3 consecutive days where you'll work on this project using randomized time blocks. Use a timer or app to alternate between 15, 25, and 10-minute work intervals. After each interval, take a short break and note your progress. As you implement these strategies, you're likely to see some significant changes in your productivity and motivation. A good outcome would be a 40% reduction in task aversion impulses. You'll find yourself less likely to procrastinate and more able to start tasks without internal resistance. An excellent outcome would be dopamine spikes becoming tied to work milestones. You'll start to feel a sense of anticipation and excitement as you approach task completion, rather than dread or avoidance. The best possible outcome? You'll develop what I call autopilot execution for high-effort tasks. Your brain will have been so effectively rewired that starting and completing challenging work becomes as automatic and rewarding as checking your phone used to be. Of course, as with any powerful technique, there are potential pitfalls to be aware of. One risk is over-rewarding trivial tasks. If you're not careful, you might find yourself breaking tasks down into such small steps that you're constantly rewarding yourself without making meaningful progress. The fix for this is to reserve your most significant rewards for efforts of at least 20 minutes. Smaller steps can still be acknowledged, but save your dopamine-triggering rewards for more substantial chunks of work. Another risk is that the dopamine detox might trigger what feels like withdrawal symptoms, including headaches or intense cravings for your usual distractions. If this happens, don't be discouraged. It's actually a sign that the detox is working, resetting your dopamine baseline. To mitigate this, consider starting with shorter detox periods. Begin with 12-hour blocks and gradually work your way up to the full 48-hour detox. This allows your brain to adjust more gradually, reducing the intensity of any withdrawal symptoms. As we wrap up this chapter, I want you to remember that dopamine stacking isn't about tricking your brain. It's about aligning your brain's reward system with your long-term goals and values. By strategically engineering dopamine releases around productive behaviors, you're not just changing your habits, you're literally rewiring your brain for success. But as powerful as dopamine stacking is, it's just one piece of the productivity puzzle. In our next chapter, we'll explore a force even more fundamental than dopamine, a force that, when properly harnessed, can make productivity not just rewarding, but automatic. Get ready to discover how the most successful people in the world have turned productivity into a reflex and how you can do the same. Chapter 5, Ritual over Willpower. Have you ever wondered why some days you can power through your to-do list with ease, while on others, even the simplest tasks feel like climbing Mount Everest? The answer lies not in your level of motivation or the difficulty of the tasks themselves, but in a force far more powerful and consistent: ritual. In this chapter, we're going to explore a revolutionary approach to productivity that doesn't rely on fleeting motivation or finite willpower. Instead, we'll delve into the world of sensory rituals, a set of techniques so powerful they're used by elite military units to maintain peak performance under the most extreme conditions. But before we dive into the how, let's talk about the why. Why is ritual so important? The answer lies in the limitations of willpower. For decades, we've been told that success is simply a matter of having enough willpower. If you can just force yourself to work hard enough, you'll achieve your goals. But there's a problem with this approach. Willpower is a finite resource. Numerous studies have shown that willpower depletes throughout the day, like a muscle that gets tired with use. This is why it's often easier to stick to your goals in the morning, but by evening, you find yourself reaching for that unhealthy snack or procrastinating on important tasks. Relying on willpower alone is like trying to run a marathon on a single bottle of water. You might start strong, but you're bound to run out of steam before you reach the finish line. This is where rituals come in. Unlike willpower, which requires conscious effort and depletes over time, rituals operate on a different level of our consciousness. They bypass the need for decision-making and tap into the power of habit and conditioning. When properly designed and implemented, rituals can automate action, making productivity as natural and effortless as breathing. To understand the power of ritual, let's look at how it's used in one of the most high-stakes environments imaginable: SEAL Team 6, the elite unit responsible for some of the most daring military operations in recent history. These operators don't rely on motivation or willpower to perform under extreme pressure. Instead, they use what I call action priming, a series of carefully designed rituals that prepare their minds and bodies for peak performance. The SEAL Team 6 tactical ritual blueprint consists of 3 key phases: gear prep, mental rehearsal, and a 3-2-1 countdown. Each phase serves a specific purpose in priming the mind and body for action. The gear prep phase isn't just about ensuring equipment is ready. It's a kinetic ritual that signals to the body that it's time to perform. The mental rehearsal phase visualizes success, priming the mind for the task ahead. And the 3-2-1 countdown serves as a final, powerful trigger for action. But you don't have to be a Navy SEAL to benefit from this approach. We can adapt these principles to create powerful rituals for everyday productivity. One key technique is what I call the 10-second rule. This simple but effective rule states that once you've decided to start a task, you must begin within 10 seconds. This brief window bypasses the brain's tendency to overthink and generates immediate action. The power of the 10-second rule lies in its ability to short-circuit our natural resistance to starting tasks. It creates a sense of urgency that overrides the part of our brain that wants to procrastinate. By making task initiation mandatory within such a short time frame, we don't give ourselves the chance to come up with excuses or get distracted. But rituals aren't just about timing. They're also about engaging our senses to create powerful neurochemical shifts that prime us for action. This is where sensory anchoring comes into play. Sensory anchoring involves associating specific sensory stimuli with desired mental states or behaviors. By consistently pairing certain sensory cues with productive activities, we can create powerful triggers for focus and action. One particularly effective form of sensory anchoring involves olfactory triggers. Our sense of smell has a direct line to the limbic system, the part of our brain responsible for emotions and memory. By using specific scents only during focused work sessions, we can create a powerful association that triggers a state of concentration on demand. For example, you might choose to diffuse peppermint oil only when you're engaged in deep, focused work. Over time, your brain will begin to associate the scent of peppermint with a state of concentration, making it easier to slip into that mental state whenever you smell peppermint. Another powerful technique is the use of kinetic activation rituals. These are physical movements or postures that we can use to signal to our bodies that it's time to perform. A simple but effective example is the 2-minute power stance. Before starting a critical task, stand with your feet shoulder-width apart, hands on your hips, chin up, for 2 full minutes. This posture has been shown to increase testosterone and decrease cortisol, creating a biochemical state of confidence and readiness. Now, let's talk about how to apply these concepts in your daily life. Start by designing a morning ritual that incorporates 3 timed triggers. This could involve a sequence like this: 30 seconds of deep breathing, followed by 60 seconds of stretching, and concluding with a 90-second review of your top 3 priorities for the day. The key is to make this sequence consistent and time-bound, creating a reliable trigger for starting your day in a productive state. Next, choose a specific scent to associate with your high-focus work sessions. This could be an essential oil, a candle, or even a particular brand of coffee. The important thing is to use this scent only when you're engaged in deep, focused work. Over time, the mere presence of this scent will help trigger a state of concentration. As you implement these strategies, you're likely to see some significant changes in your productivity patterns. A good outcome would be a 30% increase in the speed of task initiation. You'll find yourself able to start tasks more quickly and with less internal resistance. An excellent outcome would be the development of what I call muscle memory execution. This is when your rituals become so ingrained that they trigger productive behavior almost automatically, like a well-practiced dance move or a professional athlete's perfect form. The best possible outcome? You'll reach a state where zero conscious effort is required to start tasks. Your rituals will have become so powerful and ingrained that productive behavior becomes your default state, requiring no more thought or effort than breathing. Of course, as with any powerful technique, there are potential pitfalls to be aware of. One risk is that rituals can sometimes become superstitious crutches. You might find yourself feeling unable to work without going through your entire ritual, even when time is of the essence. The fix for this is to regularly rotate your triggers. Every 14 days, introduce a small change to your ritual. This could be as simple as changing the scent you use or altering the order of your morning sequence. By doing this, you keep your brain engaged and prevent your rituals from becoming rigid or superstitious. Another potential issue is sensory overstimulation. In our enthusiasm to create powerful triggers, we might be tempted to engage all our senses at once. However, this can lead to overwhelm and actually decrease the effectiveness of our anchors. To avoid this, limit your sensory anchors to no more than 2 modalities at a time. For example, you might combine a scent, like peppermint oil, with a sound, like a particular piece of instrumental music. This provides enough sensory input to create a strong anchor without risking overstimulation. As we wrap up this chapter, I want you to remember that the power of ritual lies in its ability to bypass the limitations of willpower and motivation. By creating consistent, sensory-rich routines, we can automate productive behavior, making it as natural and effortless as any other habit. But powerful as rituals are, they're just one piece of the productivity puzzle. In our next chapter, we'll explore a force even more fundamental than ritual, a force that, when properly harnessed, can make productivity not just automatic, but inevitable. Get ready to discover how the most successful people in the world have turned their entire environment into a productivity machine, and how you can do the same. Chapter 6: Systems Beat Motivation. Have you ever noticed how some days you're bursting with energy and motivation, ready to conquer the world, while on others, even getting out of bed feels like a monumental task? If you've been relying on motivation to drive your productivity, you've likely experienced the frustration of this roller coaster ride. But what if I told you there was a way to achieve consistent, high-level performance regardless of how you feel on any given day? Welcome to the world of systems-based productivity, where your success isn't determined by fleeting bursts of inspiration or willpower, but by carefully designed workflows that make action inevitable. In this chapter, we're going to explore how to create mood-proof systems that guarantee results, even on your worst days. But before we dive into the how, let's talk about the why. Why are systems so crucial? The answer lies in the unreliable nature of motivation. Motivation, while powerful, is inherently unstable. It's influenced by countless factors: your sleep, your stress levels, your environment, even the weather. Relying on motivation alone is like trying to sail across the ocean using only the wind. You might make progress on good days, but you'll be left drifting when the breeze dies down. Systems, on the other hand, are like having an engine on your boat. They provide consistent, reliable power regardless of external conditions. When properly designed, systems can guarantee over 90% task adherence, compared to the wildly fluctuating performance you get with motivation alone. So, how do we create these powerful systems? The key lies in what I call frictionless workflow architecture. This is about designing your work environment and processes to minimize resistance and make productive action the path of least resistance. One crucial element of frictionless workflow architecture is the concept of the one-click environment. Imagine if starting your most important work was as easy as clicking a single button. No setup required, no decisions to make, just instant action. This is the power of a one-click environment. To create a one-click environment, you need to eliminate all setup tasks and have your tools preloaded and ready to go. This might mean having specific browser windows with all necessary tabs open, documents ready on your desktop, or even physical tools laid out and prepared. The goal is to reduce the activation energy required to start working to near zero. But frictionless workflow architecture isn't just about your physical or digital environment. It's also about how you structure your habits and routines. This is where the concept of Atomic Habits 2.0 comes into play. You might be familiar with the idea of habit stacking, linking a new habit to an existing one to make it stick. Atomic Habits 2.0 takes this a step further by linking habits not just to actions, but to emotional states. The goal is to create automatic responses to different moods or mental states that keep you productive no matter how you feel. For example, you might create a habit script that says, "If I feel overwhelmed, I will write 50 words." This simple script provides a clear, actionable step to take when you're in a state that might otherwise lead to procrastination. By consistently following this script, you train your brain to respond to feelings of overwhelm with productive action rather than avoidance. Now, as powerful as these positive systems are, sometimes we need a bit of negative motivation to really drive action. This is where the concept of failure cascade chains comes in. A failure cascade chain is a visualization tool that helps you see the domino effect of inaction. To create a failure cascade chain, start with a specific goal or task. Then map out the consequences of not achieving that goal, not just immediately, but in cascading stages over time. What happens if you don't complete the task today? What about next week, next month, next year? This exercise isn't about inducing anxiety, but about creating a clear, visceral understanding of why action is necessary. When you can see the long-term consequences of inaction laid out before you, it becomes much easier to overcome short-term resistance and take action. Another powerful tool in the system's arsenal is time block clustering. This involves scheduling uninterrupted blocks of time, ideally 90 minutes, for your most high-leverage tasks. During these blocks, you focus solely on the task at hand, with no distractions allowed. This system leverages your natural energy cycles and attention span to maximize productivity. Now, let's talk about how to apply these concepts in your daily life. Start by auditing your current workflows. Choose 3 key processes in your work or personal life and examine them for sources of friction. Where do you tend to get stuck or procrastinate? What small obstacles consistently trip you up? Once you've identified these friction points, brainstorm ways to eliminate or minimize them. Next, create an if-then consequence map for one of your quarterly goals. Start with the goal itself, then map out what happens if you don't make progress this week, next month, and so on. Be specific and honest about the consequences. This map will serve as a powerful motivator when you're tempted to procrastinate. As you implement these strategies, you're likely to see some significant changes in your productivity patterns. A good outcome would be a 50% increase in the speed of task initiation. You'll find yourself able to start tasks more quickly and with less internal resistance. An excellent outcome would be achieving mood-irrelevant task execution. This means you're able to perform at a high level regardless of how you feel on any given day. Your systems have effectively bypassed the need for motivation or willpower. The best possible outcome? Your systems become so robust that they auto-correct deviations. If you start to veer off course, your systems automatically nudge you back on track without conscious effort on your part. Of course, as with any powerful approach, there are potential pitfalls to be aware of. One risk is over-engineering your systems to the point where they create new sources of friction. In your enthusiasm to create comprehensive systems, you might end up with overly complex processes that are difficult to follow. The fix for this is simple. Aim to simplify your systems to 3 steps or fewer whenever possible. Remember, the goal is to reduce friction, not create new obstacles. If a system feels cumbersome or difficult to follow, it's probably too complex. Another potential issue is that failure cascade chains, if not used carefully, can induce anxiety rather than motivation. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by the long-term consequences you've mapped out, try focusing on shorter time frames. Limit your consequence mapping to 1-week windows. This provides enough motivation without becoming paralyzing. As we wrap up this chapter, I want you to remember that the power of systems lies in their ability to make productivity automatic and inevitable. By creating frictionless workflows, mood-linked habits, and clear consequence maps, you're building a productivity machine that runs smoothly regardless of your emotional state or energy levels. But as powerful as systems are, they're just one piece of the productivity puzzle. In our next chapter, we'll explore a force even more fundamental than systems. A force that, when properly harnessed, can make productivity not just automatic, but instantaneous. Get ready to discover how the most successful people in the world have mastered the art of starting and how you can do the same in a matter of seconds. Chapter 7, Hesitation Interception. Have you ever found yourself staring at a task, knowing you need to start, but feeling an inexplicable resistance holding you back? That moment of hesitation, that brief window where your mind races to find excuses, reasons to delay, or suddenly remembers a dozen other urgent things you should do first. That's the battleground we're about to conquer. Welcome to the world of hesitation interception, where we'll explore powerful strategies to override your brain's natural tendency to procrastinate and make excuses. But before we dive into the how, let's talk about the why. Why is this split second of hesitation so crucial? The answer lies in a startling statistic. 78% of abandoned tasks die within the first 30 seconds. That's right. More than 3/4 of the things we fail to accomplish are derailed almost instantly, victims of that brief moment of hesitation. This isn't just about productivity, it's about the cumulative impact of all those abandoned tasks on our goals, our self-esteem, and our potential. So, what's happening in those critical 30 seconds? To understand this, we need to delve into the workings of a part of your brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is your brain's threat detection system, constantly on the lookout for potential dangers. But here's the catch. In our modern world, the amygdala often misclassifies challenging tasks as threats. When you're faced with a task that seems difficult, time-consuming, or potentially unpleasant, your amygdala can trigger what's known as an amygdala hijack. This is a stress response that bypasses your rational thinking and pushes you towards avoidance. It's this hijack that we need to intercept. The key to overcoming this hijack lies in what I call action-first thinking. This approach is about prioritizing immediate action over deliberation. It's about moving before your brain has a chance to talk you out of it. But how do we put this into practice? Enter the 2-minute incursion protocol. This simple but powerful technique involves committing to work on any task for just 120 seconds. That's it. 2 minutes. It sounds almost trivially easy, doesn't it? But that's precisely the point. By setting the bar so low, we sidestep the amygdala's threat response. Here's how it works. When you feel that hesitation creeping in, don't try to fight it head on. Instead, tell yourself, I'm just going to do this for 2 minutes. Then, without giving yourself time to reconsider, dive in. Start typing, start organizing, start whatever the task requires. Just for 2 minutes. What happens next is often surprising. Once you're in motion, you'll frequently find that the resistance melts away. This is because you've disrupted the amygdala hijack before it could fully take hold. You've replaced hesitation with action, and action has a momentum all its own. But the 2-minute incursion isn't just about getting started. It also leverages a psychological principle known as the Zeigarnik effect. This effect states that unfinished tasks create a kind of mental tension that our brains want to resolve. By starting a task, even for just 2 minutes, you create this tension. Your brain, seeking resolution, will often urge you to continue beyond the initial 2 minutes. Now, sometimes even 2 minutes can feel daunting. For those moments, we need what I call amygdala hijack countermeasures. These are rapid, kinetic actions that distract your brain from its hesitation. One effective countermeasure is simply to engage in rapid typing. It doesn't matter what you type. It could be, I don't want to do this, over and over. The physical act of typing engages your motor cortex, diverting resources from the amygdala and often breaking the cycle of hesitation. But what about those times when it's not just hesitation holding you back, but doubt? What about when perfectionism rears its ugly head, telling you that unless you can do something flawlessly, you shouldn't do it at all? For these moments, we need automated doubt deflection. At the heart of automated doubt deflection is what I call the wrong action principle. This principle states that taking the wrong action is almost always better than taking no action at all. Why? Because action generates feedback, and feedback is the raw material of progress. To implement this principle, we use doubt deflection scripts. These are pre-prepared phrases that you can use to counter your perfectionist tendencies. One powerful script is, done beats perfect. Draft now, revise later. By internalizing this script, you give yourself permission to produce imperfect work, knowing that you can improve it later. Another powerful tool in our hesitation interception arsenal is the concept of rapid routine loops. These are small, predefined sequences of actions that you can execute almost automatically. For example, you might create a loop for email management that goes like this. Open one email, spend 60 seconds outlining a response, then send. No overthinking, no perfectionism, just rapid execution. Now, let's talk about how to apply these concepts in your daily life. Start by identifying 5 tasks that you've been postponing. For each of these tasks, Commit to applying the 2-minute rule. Remember, you're not trying to complete the entire task in 2 minutes. You're just committing to start and work for that brief period. Next, write 3 doubt deflection scripts tailored to your most common hesitations. These might be things like progress over perfection or feedback is more valuable than flawlessness. The key is to make these scripts personal and meaningful to you. As you implement these strategies, you're likely to see some significant changes in your productivity patterns. A good outcome would be a 60% reduction in task abandonment. You'll find yourself starting and often completing tasks that you would have previously put off. An excellent outcome would be for instant task starts to become reflexive. You'll find yourself diving into tasks without that moment of hesitation, almost as if your body is moving before your mind has a chance to object. The best possible outcome? Your amygdala no longer vetoes action. This doesn't mean you'll never feel resistance or doubt, but rather that these feelings no longer have the power to stop you from taking action. You'll have rewired your brain to prioritize action over avoidance. Of course, as with any powerful technique, there are potential pitfalls to be aware of. One risk is that frequent use of the 2-minute incursion technique might lead to increased task switching, potentially fragmenting your focus. If you find this happening, try limiting your incursions to 3 per day and then escalating to longer work periods once you've started a task. Another potential issue is that your doubt deflection scripts might lose their potency over time through repetition. Your brain can become desensitized to the same phrases if you use them too often. The fix for this is simple. Rotate your scripts weekly, introducing new phrases to keep your brain engaged. As we wrap up this chapter, I want you to remember that hesitation is not an immovable obstacle. It's a brief window of vulnerability that with the right techniques, you can learn to close before it derails your productivity. By mastering hesitation interception, you're not just improving your productivity, you're reclaiming control over your actions and, by extension, your outcomes. But as powerful as these techniques are, they're just one piece of the productivity puzzle. In our next chapter, we'll explore a concept that might seem counterintuitive at first. A force that, when properly understood and harnessed, can turn your greatest setbacks into your most powerful catalysts for growth. Get ready to discover how the most successful people in the world have learned to thrive not in spite of failure, but because of it. Chapter 8, Failure Immunity. What if I told you that the very thing you've been trying to avoid your entire life could be the key to unlocking your full potential? That the stumbling blocks you've cursed and the setbacks you've lamented could be transformed into stepping stones to success. Welcome to the world of failure immunity, where we'll explore how to turn your greatest weaknesses into your most powerful strengths. But before we dive into the how, let's talk about the why. Why is developing failure immunity so crucial? The answer lies in a sobering statistic. 92% of people relapse into old patterns after experiencing a single failure. That's right, more than 9 out of 10 people abandon their goals, their dreams, their attempts at change, all because of one setback. This isn't just about productivity or success, it's about resilience, about the ability to persist in the face of adversity. So what's happening in that critical moment when failure strikes? To understand this, we need to delve into the concept of fragility. Most of us have been conditioned to think of ourselves, our goals, and our systems as fragile things, easily broken, easily derailed. We treat failure as a catastrophe, a sign that we're not cut out for the task at hand. But what if we could change that? What if we could become not just resilient, but anti-fragile? The concept of anti-fragility, coined by philosopher Nassim Nicholas Taleb, refers to systems that actually get stronger when exposed to stressors, volatility, and disorder. It's not just about bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward, using setbacks as fuel for growth. This is the foundation of our anti-fragility framework. At the heart of the anti-fragility framework is what I call the stressor stacking protocol. This involves deliberately introducing controlled stressors into your systems to force adaptability and growth. One practical way to implement this is to schedule your tasks at 80% of your perceived capacity. This might sound counterintuitive. After all, aren't we trying to maximize productivity? But by consistently pushing yourself to operate slightly beyond your comfort zone, you're training your systems to adapt and grow stronger. But anti-fragility isn't just about preemptive measures. It's also about how we respond when failure does strike. This is where the post-failure autopsy template comes in. This simple but powerful tool helps you extract maximum value from every setback. The formula is straightforward: collapse, worked, patch. First, you identify what collapsed, what part of your system or plan failed. Then, you analyze what worked despite the failure. Finally, you develop a patch, a specific actionable improvement to your system based on what you've learned. This process transforms failure from a dead end into a feedback loop, constantly refining and strengthening your approach. Now, let's talk about what happens in those critical moments immediately after a failure. This is where many people falter, letting negative emotions and self-doubt spiral out of control. To combat this, we need a rapid response protocol, a way to reboot our mental state and get back on track quickly. Enter the 60-second neural reset. The 60-second neural reset combines physiological and psychological techniques to rapidly shift your state. It starts with box breathing, a simple breathing pattern used by Navy SEALs to regain composure under stress. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. Repeat this cycle while mentally repeating the mantra, reset, reload, go. This combination of controlled breathing and focused thought helps to deactivate the stress response and re-engage your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and decision-making. But sometimes, even with these techniques, the emotional sting of failure can linger. This is where failure rebranding scripts come into play. These are pre-prepared mental scripts that help you reframe failure in a more constructive light. For example, instead of thinking, "I've failed," you might tell yourself, "This isn't an error, it's system diagnostics." This shift in perspective transforms failure from a judgment on your worth to valuable data for improvement. Now, let's talk about how to apply these concepts in your daily life. Start by conducting a post-failure autopsy on a recent setback. Remember the formula: collapse, worked, patch. What went wrong? What elements of your approach or system held up despite the failure? And most importantly, what specific, actionable change can you make to improve your system going forward? Next, practice the 60-second reset after 3 interruptions or minor setbacks in your day. This could be after receiving a challenging email, encountering an unexpected obstacle in a project, or simply feeling your focus waver. The goal is to make this reset a reflexive response to stress or setbacks. As you implement these strategies, you're likely to see some significant changes in how you handle setbacks. A good outcome would be a 50% increase in your recovery speed from failures. You'll find yourself bouncing back more quickly, spending less time dwelling on setbacks and more time taking constructive action. An excellent outcome would be developing a neutral emotional response to setbacks. This doesn't mean you won't feel momentary disappointment or frustration, but rather that these emotions no longer derail you. You'll be able to view failures objectively as data points rather than disasters. The best possible outcome? Your failures will start to auto-trigger adaptive system patches. In other words, you'll develop such a strong failure immunity that setbacks automatically prompt constructive responses. You'll find yourself instinctively extracting lessons and making improvements without conscious effort. Of course, as with any powerful technique, there are potential pitfalls to be aware of. One risk is falling into over-analysis paralysis during your post-failure autopsies. It's easy to get caught up in examining every minute detail of a failure, but this can lead to inaction and further delay. The fix for this is simple. Limit your autopsies to 3 key bullet points. Focus on the most impactful lessons and actionable improvements. Another potential issue is that reset rituals can sometimes become procrastination tools in themselves. You might find yourself using the 60-second reset as a way to avoid diving back into challenging tasks. To prevent this, it's crucial to time limit your resets strictly to 60 seconds. Use a timer if necessary. The goal is to shift your state rapidly, not to avoid re-engaging with your tasks. As we wrap up this chapter, I want you to remember that failure is not your enemy. It's not even a necessary evil. When approached with the right mindset and tools, failure becomes your greatest teacher, your most effective, refining fire. By developing failure immunity, you're not just improving your resilience, you're transforming the very nature of setbacks in your life. But as powerful as failure immunity is, it's just one piece of the productivity puzzle. In our next chapter, we'll explore a concept that might seem almost magical at first, a way of working that doesn't just overcome obstacles, but actually thrives on them. Get ready to discover how the most successful people in the world have learned to create systems that don't just survive chaos, but use it as fuel for unprecedented growth and achievement. Chapter 9, Forever Forward Protocol. Welcome to the final frontier of productivity, where chaos becomes your ally and obstacles transform into opportunities. In this chapter, we'll explore the Forever Forward Protocol, a revolutionary approach to designing systems that don't just withstand chaos, but actually thrive on it. This is where all the strategies and techniques we've discussed throughout this book culminate in a perpetual motion machine of productivity and growth. At the heart of the Forever Forward Protocol lies the concept of adaptive momentum. This isn't about rigid planning or inflexible routines. Instead, it's about creating agility-driven workflows that can pivot and evolve in real time. Imagine a system so responsive that it automatically adjusts to changes in your environment, energy levels, and priorities. That's the power of adaptive momentum. But how do we build such a system? It starts with embracing unpredictability. Instead of trying to control every variable, we design our workflows to capitalize on uncertainty. This might mean setting flexible daily targets rather than fixed schedules, or using dynamic task prioritization tools that adjust based on real-time data about your productivity and energy levels. One powerful technique for building adaptive momentum is what I call the flux capacity principle. This involves deliberately leaving 20% of your scheduled time unallocated. This buffer isn't for relaxation or downtime. It's a dynamic resource that can be deployed to tackle unexpected challenges or capitalize on sudden opportunities. By building this flexibility into your system, you create a workflow that bends rather than breaks when faced with disruption. Next, let's talk about obstacle arbitrage. This is the art of recycling failures and setbacks into fuel for future success. It's about more than just learning from mistakes. It's about actively seeking out challenges as opportunities for growth and innovation. One way to implement obstacle arbitrage is through what I call the setback springboard technique. Whenever you encounter a failure or obstacle, immediately ask yourself, how can I use this to leap forward? For example, if a project gets canceled, instead of lamenting the lost opportunity, consider how the freed up resources could be used to accelerate another goal. By consistently applying this mindset, you'll find that setbacks often become catalysts for unexpected breakthroughs. But the Forever Forward Protocol isn't just about external systems. It's also about rewiring your internal identity. This is where the concept of the perpetual motion identity comes into play. It's about cementing an action-first self-concept, where taking decisive action becomes as natural and automatic as breathing. To develop a perpetual motion identity, we use a technique called identity reinforcement loops. This involves consistently linking your actions to your core identity. For example, every time you start a task without hesitation, you might tell yourself, I am a person who takes immediate action. Over time, these reinforcements reshape your self-concept, making proactive behavior your default state. Now let's zoom out and look at how all of these strategies and techniques we've explored throughout this book come together to empower you. What we've been building, step by step, is nothing less than total neural sovereignty over procrastination. Through the war on delay, we've rewired your brain's architecture to prioritize action over avoidance. The pressure paradox and dopamine stacking have transformed your neurochemistry, making productivity not just easier, but actually addictive. Rituals have replaced willpower, creating automatic triggers for focused work. Systems have trumped fleeting motivation, ensuring consistent execution regardless of your mood or energy levels. With the hesitation-interception techniques, you've learned to override your brain's excuse-making tendencies in real time. Failure immunity has transformed setbacks from roadblocks into launching pads. And now, with the Forever Forward protocol, you've built a self-evolving system that turns chaos and uncertainty into fuel for perpetual growth. But the impact of these changes extends far beyond your to-do list. Let's talk about how this transformation affects your relationships and overall quality of life. As you consistently meet commitments and follow through on your word, reliability becomes a core part of your identity. This rebuilds trust in both personal and professional relationships. People start to see you as someone they can count on, opening up new opportunities and deepening connections. Moreover, the reduced stress that comes from having control over your productivity spills over into all your interactions. Instead of constantly operating in crisis mode, always playing catch-up, you approach life with a sense of calm focus. This not only makes you more pleasant to be around, but also improves the quality of your work and decision-making. Now, let's talk about the kinds of achievements that become possible with these new tools and mindsets. Those long-stalled projects that have been haunting you, you now have the ability to launch them with confidence. In fact, with your failure immune systems, you can often execute what used to be 6-month goals in as little as 6 weeks. You'll also master the art of adaptive prioritization. Your systems will automatically recalibrate task hierarchies after setbacks, ensuring that you're always working on what's most important, not just what's most urgent. This level of agility allows you to navigate complex projects and shifting priorities with ease. But perhaps the most exciting aspect of this transformation is that it leads to sustained improvement with less effort over time. Thanks to neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated experiences, the gains you make compound over time. In the first year or two, you might need to consciously force action, but by year 3 and beyond, action forces you. Productivity becomes your default state, requiring little conscious effort. This is what I call autopilot excellence. Your systems scale your results without requiring additional willpower or effort from you. It's like having a productivity machine that runs in the background, constantly optimizing your performance and pushing you towards your goals. As we conclude this book, I want you to take a moment to reflect on the journey you've undertaken. You've not just learned a set of techniques or strategies, you've embarked on a fundamental rewiring of your brain and reshaping of your identity. You've transformed from someone at the mercy of procrastination and circumstance to the architect of your own success. The Forever Forward protocol isn't just about getting more done. It's about becoming more resilient, more adaptable, more capable of turning challenges into opportunities. It's about creating a life where growth and achievement are not occasional events, but your constant state of being. Remember, this is not the end of your journey, but the beginning. The systems and mindsets you've developed are designed to evolve and improve over time. Each day presents new opportunities to refine your approach, to turn setbacks into stepping stones, and to push the boundaries of what you thought was possible. You now possess the tools to create perpetual forward motion in your life. You have the power to transform chaos into opportunity, to turn obstacles into fuel for growth. You are no longer a passive participant in your life, but an active creator of your destiny. So, what's next? That's entirely up to you. The possibilities are limitless. Whether you want to start a business, write a book, transform your health, or simply become the most reliable and productive version of yourself, you now have the tools to make it happen. The future is yours to shape. Your journey of perpetual growth and achievement starts now. But as you embark on this new chapter, you might find yourself wondering how to maintain order amidst the whirlwind of productivity you've unleashed. After all, a mind in constant motion can sometimes feel chaotic. What if there was a way to harness this newfound energy and direct it with laser-like precision? To not just do more, but to think more clearly and act more purposefully. There is, and it's the perfect complement to the skills you've just mastered. For the ultimate guide to organizing your thoughts and maximizing your mental potential, don't miss the audiobook, The Self-Organized Mind, Systems Thinking to Master an Unruly Mind. Tap the center of the video now to continue your transformation journey.